Hello and thank you for checking out this video. Today I am joined by Albert, who is a Junior Partnership Project Manager at Gameloft. And today we talk about Albert's journey from working in more of the films industry with a focus on sound design, transitioning and using those skills and moving into the games industry, where he currently works as a Junior Partnership Project Manager at Gameloft and working on the game Asphalt 9. Albert gives a really good account in terms of what his role looks like, i.e. working with different types of brands and how those brands are integrated into Asphalt 9 and what his role is to enable that to happen. He also gives a good account in terms of how he found his role in the games industry. A lot of proactiveness on his part, so it's going to be very interesting to hear about his story and how he proactively found his way into the games industry. And I think he gives a great account in terms of some good skills on how to do that. Now, before we jump into the video, again, as always, as I mentioned at the beginning of these videos, I am still looking for volunteers. Regardless of your occupation within the games industry, I'd love to sit down and have a conversation with you about your role, your background, and how you got into the industry, as I feel people watching these videos would find them very insightful. And just a quick disclaimer as well, unfortunately the audio and video is out of sync for quite a lot of this video. I'm not very technical. I have tried to fix it, but unfortunately there is still issues on that front. But the audio is clear and I'm hoping that you will find it insightful in terms of the information that Albert gives us today. So with that in mind, I hope you enjoy the video. I hope, again, you find it very informative. That seems to be the word of all these videos, which I hope they are. And I hope you enjoy it. And yeah, I'll pass it over to Albert to introduce himself. Thank you.
My name is Albert. I'm from Barcelona, Spain. I work at Gameloft as a Junior Partnerships Project Manager, mostly for the Asphalt 9 Legends team. And I'm very happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And thank you for being here as well. I'm really interested in today's conversation in terms of obviously exploring the role of a partnership project manager and what that looks like in the industry. But also, I think we're going to have an interesting conversation around esports as well. It's not something I'm fully familiar with, so please forgive me if I seem like I don't know what I'm talking about, because that's definitely the case. But yeah, I'm going to lean on your expertise and your advice for things like that as we go along today. But I guess with that in mind, as you mentioned there, you're a junior partnership project manager at Gameloft. So what I'd love to know is, what is that? What is a junior partnership project manager, and what does a typical day look like for you?
So I work on the Asphalt 9 Legends team, the racing mobile game. And as it is the games with many racing games, we feature real cars. And oftentimes we'll be approached by partners of the brands or manufacturers themselves that will want to produce some branded content in the game. Like, for instance, they want to showcase their new car, or they want to maybe add another lever to an already existing activation with a partner. So for instance, I don't know, maybe Tag Heuer and Porsche have a partnership already and want to do something in a virtual environment. And so they'll come to us for that. And so these events are not part of our usual production roadmap because we cannot predict when they'll come up usually, but they're still part of the essence of the game. So the partnership team basically takes care of all of these, as well as our esports. So what will happen is the production team has its roadmap. It's done on a yearly basis, so with its features and what we plan to do for the year. And then we'll have these sorts of ad hoc activations that will come in. And so that's what we handle. We handle all the production of these activations that are, let's say, not part of the roadmap of our game per se. And I like to think of myself as the link between marketing and the production team of the game. An example of something like this could be our most recent esports competition. We just mentioned esports, so I think it's cool to bring them in already. We've done an esports competition in partnership with Bose, Tag Heuer, and Porsche. And my team has managed everything from the ideation of the competition and the partnership to the negotiation with the partners, the execution of the event, the production of the assets, the setup in game, the testing, etc., etc. Typically, we'll have at least 3 projects running. One will be in like the ideation phase, where we're still like coming up with ideas, how we can make our partner fit within the brand and within the game, and how we can make it so that it's an entertaining activation for players. Another in pre-production, so in full-blown production of assets and maybe writing the contracts. We'll be preparing our social media and marketing strategies, et cetera, et cetera. This is usually the most time consuming part of the whole ordeal. And then we'll have one live in the game, which usually once it's live, we don't have to do that much. We basically monitor its progress. And because we've tested everything in advance, things tend to go smoothly. And a normal day, it varies a lot, but it's like control chaos and a lot of like task switching, because since we have at least 3 projects running, and then there's always the day-to-day, I am not focused on one thing only. I'll jump from one thing to the next. And because what I do is I don't really, quote unquote, I don't really do anything. You know, I help others produce work. So I'll always be assisting people with tasks, with files. I'm sort of like the nexus with all the information. So people will come to me with questions about a specific thing. And so I spend all of my time answering questions in meetings with partners, with the game team, to make sure that everything is in its proper place and is as we have envisioned it with the partner.
That's awesome. So interestingly enough then, so I like what you said there in terms of being that link between marketing, core production, and I imagine obviously these brands like Porsche, Tag and Bose and things like that. So obviously when we talk about Porsche, Tag and Bose, very different brands in terms of like what their products are. Obviously some are cars, some are luxury brands, and Bose obviously is Bose, it's audio and things like that. So I'm just curious to see, how do you, when you're playing that link, how do you make sure everybody's on the right page and making sure that you're sort of headed towards the desired outcome of all these different brands?
So in this case, for instance, it all came to be because Porsche already has an existing partnership with these 2 other partners. So okay. Bose already has a partnership with Porsche, and Tag Heuer already has a partnership with Porsche. And so by partnering with Porsche in this case, we gained access to these partners. And so once we decided that we wanted to run esports competition with Porsche, then it was all about how do we bring your partners into the game in a way that fits their brand. In our case, for instance, we designed a custom UI timer for the competition that features the Tag Heuer watch. And so we could natively bring Tag Heuer into the game. With Bose, it was a little bit more difficult because we couldn't change the audio of the game. Our soundtrack is like one of the key signatures of our brand, of our identity as a game. But so what we did in that case was we produced an article showcasing how a good listening experience is important in gaming, and how basically taking care of how you listen to the game can give you that edge when you're playing esports, right? So when you're striving for high performance. And then as a way to make it cool and to make sure that these brands were not only kind of, featured on a corner or on like a visual in the game or something like that, what we did is we designed liveries for the cars. So the brands are featured on Porsche cars. Then the players race with those liveries during these different stages. And we produce videos showcasing with some beauty shots of the liveries. We produce some trailers. So as we spoke with these partners, we also found ways the most relevant ways to integrate them into the game. With Tag Heuer, it was very straightforward with the timer. With Bose, it was a little bit more difficult, but nevertheless, we found a way to integrate them into the storytelling of the esports competition that made sense for what they were looking for at the time. And we do this in a custom basis. So if our next partnership is with, I don't know, Red Bull, then we'll find a way to integrate Red Bull into our storytelling in a way that feels coherent.
Could that be with the Red Bull car? I mean, I'm not sure if you have this where you are, but in terms of from a marketing perspective, I always see the Red Bull cars with the Red Bull can on the back. Yeah, I was just sort of thinking out loud there. Could that be an option?
Of course, yeah. I mean, that's a really cool option. And, our 3D, our vehicle team, they're They're super talented, and one of the things that, we have similar concepts that we've played with in the past. So I think that the Red Bull car would be a good fit. I think they're also making a concept car, I believe.
Right.
So that's also a good fit for the game. So who knows? Maybe that's a way to start a partnership with Red Bull, right? Through their concept car.
That's awesome. I loved what you said as well around using the tag watch as like a timer, incorporating that into the game as well. Because I was thinking, how would you do that in terms of obviously it being a luxury brand? How would you get that in there? And that sounds really cool and interesting as well. So yeah, thank you for that. That sounds really cool. So you spoke then about being the link between different teams. So what I'd love to know now is how does your role interact and collaborate with other teams and departments?
Well, we internally and externally, the partnerships team, we're kind of like ambassadors. So externally, we are the face of Asphalt 9 Legends. So we handle all the partners. So basically, we are the face of the company when it comes to dealing with Porsche or Tag Heuer or Bose or whoever it may be. Internally, we kind of juggle different things because we need to support the activation. We need to also protect our teams, protect the production roadmap of the game, which is obviously should be always our main focus. And then we, at the same time, we also, of course, want to do cool stuff. So we always play this balancing act where we're kind of protecting our interests, but protecting those of our partners, but protecting those of our teams internally. So we kind of play this balancing act. We're also basically facilitators. So as I told you before, I don't produce anything. I can't point at a 3D model in the game and say, I made that, My job is not to make things per se, but to give people the tools that they need and empower them to make their job. So they don't have to worry about dependencies or coordinating with other teams, or if they need a logo from whatever brand or they need whatever asset from another team, that's on me, or localizing files or whatever it may be, that's on me to take care of. If you are a 3D modeler or a 3D artist, I just want to make sure that you can focus on what you do best and that you have all the tools at your fingertips to do your best work. And then I just let you be. Right? Externally, obviously, because we work with real brands and real cars, everything we do goes through a validation process. So let's say that we bring in a new car in an update. Well, this car needs to be validated by the manufacturer. So we need to validate the 3D model. If we put any logos on it, that needs to be validated, not just by the brand itself, but also by the car who's going to have a new branded livery plaster on their car, basically. So we collect we also have to collect the requirements, negotiate the contracts, work with the brand guidelines, manage the production of these assets, etc., etc. So at the end of the day, we are just that. We are kind of jugglers, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, how do you juggle then? So obviously, a big name like Porsche or another client comes to you and they want something. They want something in the game to showcase their brand. But from a technical point of view, let's say, for instance, in this scenario, it's not possible or it takes longer. How do you juggle that between expectations of a well-known brand or client versus your internal teams?
Well, we've always been very fortunate, to be honest, because we have a very talented internal team, and we've been doing this for years. At this point, I think Asphalt 9 is almost 4.5 years old. It'll turn 5, I think, in August. We already know what our technical capabilities are. And so one of the first things we do when we are working on a project is make sure that the expectations are very clear. So if a partner is not familiar with the game, I will show them what the game is about. I'll share a screen on my device and I'll show them, look, here's how your car will be displayed. Here's how players will interact with it. Here's the kinds of events that your car will be a part of, or here's how your brand will be integrated into the game. And we make sure that that baseline is really clearly understood, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. projects take a long time. We model cars. It takes months to model a car to the level that we do. And so it wouldn't make sense for us to put in all that work and then find out at the end, oh, our expectations were not matching up. So that's the first thing we always do, is to make sure that the expectations are clear. And then our partners are usually pretty understanding when it comes to technical limitations, because we can do a lot. And so unless they ask for something very crazy or very, very, very custom, they're usually pretty good at understanding, like, hey, if what you're asking us to do will require this, this, and this, and so it doesn't fit within the timeline that we've agreed. And so we either postpone or we go with this implementation and then we maybe build on that in the future. This is something that we've done several times, where we'll put something in the game and then build upon it as we update the game. And this is one of the cool parts about being a live game, right? We get to update these things as we go. It's not like maybe a title where you just have a release and then that's it, that's your game, and you barely get to touch it. We're constantly releasing updates. Every 2 months we release new updates, new cars. So that gives us a chance to revise the content. And if something is not to our liking or to the liking of our partners, we can always work on that and change it.
Awesome. I haven't played the game, so do forgive me, but I did have a look on YouTube in terms of gameplay. And I must admit, I had to click out of the video just to check, because graphically, it looked amazing. You wouldn't think it was a mobile game. So yeah, I think obviously when you talk about partnering with these types of brands and showcasing them as a company, obviously from a graphical perspective, I bet it's quite easy to do, isn't it? You can show them all these amazing things that you've done already and use that in to show them what's capable if you partner with them.
It's one of the big selling points of our game, I think. The fact that we look so great, even though we're 4.5 years old, it's a game that still looks great now. And it can be played on relatively low end or older devices, which is great. So that gives us a lot of reach. And the fact that it looks good and the cars look like the real thing, it makes it very easy to convince car manufacturers or brands to partner with us and work with us. To be honest, it's one of the main selling points of the game, is the fact that we look so good.
Yeah, I thought the exact same thing. Definitely. Awesome. Okay, so your background, from a quick glimpse of LinkedIn, I can see obviously you've come from like a sound design, audio background, touched on a little bit of education in terms of being a professor. I think you may do that actually at the moment as well. But what I'd love to know is what's motivated you to look at a job in the games industry?
So I've always looked at I've always liked telling stories. And so video games have always been a medium that interested me as a potential career path. I just found myself doing film just because I happened to unknowingly find myself running into people within the industry, and these people were kind enough to give me a chance. So that's the route I went. As you mentioned, I'm originally a sound designer. I majored in film and broadcast with a minor in sound design. And I worked in that industry for 7 years before I joined Gameloft. But without going into too much detail, I got burned out. Film is a really cool industry, and I always say that it's like going to war, because people are cold, they're hungry, they're tired, all together all the time. And so you develop these bonds with people, these really strong bonds with people really quickly. But it can be a tough lifestyle if you're not ready for it. And honestly, once it became my job full time, I thought that I had a realization that, whoa, this is like taking over my life. And there are people that are fine being married to their job, but I decided that I did not want to be that myself. So I pivoted, and one of the fields that had always interested me was video games. So I thought, well, video games and film have a lot of parallelisms in terms of workflows and pipelines. We borrow a lot of each other's language. And so I thought my skills in film might still be relevant in video games. So then I decided to get some education to make myself a more well-rounded candidate for the industry. And so I did a master's in project management, and then I saw an opportunity at Gameloft, and was my in. And I've never looked back, to be honest. It's been a blessing, because I always thought that transition or studying film would put me in a box, in a sense that I wouldn't be able to move out of the industry. And Gameloft was very kind to me in the way that I didn't know anything. You know, I came fresh, and they immediately gave me it was an intern position, but I immediately felt like I was given responsibilities, and I immediately worked on projects that I could see in the game and that mattered to our players and to the community and to the overall development of the game. So that was really cool.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear that. And just in terms of timelines then, so did you study your master's in project management after you joined Gameloft?
It was, so the way this worked is I finished my bachelor's, then I spent 3 years working full-time. I worked with Netflix, with HBO, you name it. And then once I decided that I needed a career change, I quit my job at the studio, my sound studio where I was working at. I had maybe 2 or 3 months of like time to kind of reflect and decide what I wanted to do next. And then I was very fortunate to have an opportunity come up. My film school reached out to me. They were looking for somebody to kind of coordinate the day-to-day of their sound department. And so they said, hey, we think you'd be a good fit. And it was just a part-time position. So I thought, hey, it's going to give me the opportunity to continue to explore what I want to do in my career, while at the same time, it gives me a paycheck because I have bills to pay and I don't want to starve. So, and then one of my first tasks as a sound department coordinator back then was building a new sound studio. And while planning all that, I came in contact with the project manager of the construction company that was going to help us with the renovation. And I fell in love with what they were doing. I saw myself or my future self in them in a way. I was like, wow, that's where I want to be. And then I started working towards my master's. I had to wait a full year until my master's began, because I entered the university in December, and my master's began on November of the following year. But I took that time to prepare. I also kind of like honed in on what I wanted to do. I said, I'm going to do project management because I want to get into the gaming industry. So I reached out to a lot of people. I asked a lot of questions, EA, Ubisoft, Gameloft. I'm working now with some of the people that I reached out, that were kind enough to give me some of their time and kind of give me some wisdom as to, what does a producer do? I had no idea. I know what a producer does in film, but it's very different to what a producer will do in video games, because all of a sudden you're dealing with a lot more technical, there's a lot of technical expertise in being a producer, being able to talk with programmers and artists and engineers and 3D artists, and then being able to talk, in our case, with the stores. It's very different from what a producer in the film world would do. And so I was very lucky to be able to have a full year to kind of reach out to people and kind of learn from their experience. And basically a month after starting my master's, starting classes, I saw the position on LinkedIn. And because I already knew people in there, I asked about it. They said, yeah, man, just go ahead, submit your CV. And I mean, maybe, maybe you get lucky. And I got interviewed. I was super, for a moment, it didn't look like I was going to get it, because usually Gameloft, as well as many other studios, they'll send an acknowledgement email when you submit an application. And I didn't get it for this one. And I was a bit worried. So like, oh my God, like I submitted an application, I poured my heart and soul into it, and I don't even have the acknowledgement email. Like, did it even go through? And then I asked one of my contacts, like, hey, what I should do. And they told me, reach out to this person in HR through LinkedIn and ask. And I did, and they said, hey, you know what, it's here. We'll keep you posted. And then a couple of days later, I began the interview process. So that was, honestly, that was a blessing.
Just before we move on to my next question, I'd love to just pick up on a couple of things you've said there. So to me, it sounds like you were very proactive in terms of utilizing LinkedIn, connecting with people in the industry, asking them questions around what their job entails and how that may look like if you were to take on a similar role. So you've obviously navigated all of this to now join the industry. So obviously Gameloft is your current position and your first role in the industry. So is there anything else that you'd like to share before we move on in terms of how you found that overall process of trying to find a job? Because what I'd like to hope is that there is people watching this that are maybe in film, in other industries that are thinking, I want to work in games. So is there anything that you would like to share that helped you maybe get the job where you are today, or anything that got you to where you are now that you'd like to share? Anything else?
Honestly, my biggest thing for people that are wanting to get into video games is just reach out. LinkedIn, especially people who are active on LinkedIn, is a pretty open community, and people are happy to share their expertise. So if you, and I was always very, no, how do I put this? I always try to be careful with how I reached out to people. So I would make sure to add a little note to my connection request on LinkedIn, or I would always make sure to have a little note saying like, look, this is me. I'd like to ask you about such, these few things. It'd be great if you could give me like 2 minutes of your time so I can send you some questions, and then, I can learn from you and see, where I can use your knowledge, right? And then my recommendation or my advice would be just look up companies that you like. Try to find people who have a similar career path to yours. Weirdly enough, I was surprised to find during my research that I'm not the only film person that now works in video games. There's a lot of people that do that. And so I tried to target those people. See, look, I am now where you were 5 years ago or 10 years ago or however long it was. How about you share some of that, of your knowledge with me, so that one day I can be where you are now? And people were always really open and really comfortable with sharing information. And they even shared resources. Hey, maybe, I would ask about their day-to-day, the tools that they use. So I took it upon myself to learn a little bit of Jira, learn a little bit of Trello, learn a little bit of Confluence in advance, just to prepare myself. Hey, maybe reach out to this other person as well, ask for connections. People are open. And so just ask, honestly, just reach out and ask. And there's plenty of events also. I'm sure that if you Google events in video gaming events in Barcelona or whatever your city may be, if you live in a major city, I am pretty sure there's going to be game jams or conferences. And so just attend those. Just go, show up. And there's a lot of cool connections there to be made. And you might not meet somebody that's already working in the studio, but maybe you meet somebody who's studying video game development, and that can be your in into learning about whatever, Unity, Unreal, you name it. And that can be your in into the industry and learning more. And maybe you discover that you don't like that path and that you would maybe like something else, or maybe you fall in love with whatever, another part that you didn't see yourself falling in love with. So just ask, honestly, that would be my main thing.
Awesome. That's great advice. Thank you for sharing that. So you're currently a partnership project manager at Gameloft. So what I'd love to know, and please be honest, is what aspects of your role do you enjoy the most?
To be honest, the part that I enjoy the most is the facilitating part. I love to have people come with a question or with a request, and to be able to fulfill that. That's honestly why I get out of bed in the morning, is that feeling of when, hey, I need a couple more days to finish this because, something came up, or we just need more time because we can't fit it into our pipeline just yet. I love to be the one to run around and kind of make all the pieces of the puzzle fit. I'm also tremendously organized, sometimes a little too much. So I feel that, especially when depending on the team you're working with, programmers and producers tend to be very, very organized. And so they don't need me as much, but I feel that with at least our art teams, they usually like me to be there and kind of keep everything on track. They know where to find stuff. We've developed processes and pipelines now where all the information is kind of public to them. So it's always open. They know where to find it because we've created sort of like a system, right? And so that part of my job is probably my favorite part. I just love being able to just help people work on something that's bigger than themselves, and just to set a goal for them. And I just love to be able to just sit back and watch somebody achieve that.
That's awesome. So when we talk about, you mentioned obviously helping people, solving problems. So when we start to talk about different traits in the job, so communication, time management, those sort of things, to me, it sounds like obviously that's a big part of the job. So any tools or software that you use to help you from a communication as well as a time management perspective?
Personally, a lot of notes. So as far as school goes, Trello and Jira and Confluence are the typical ones. Trello is great for artists usually, because Jira can be very unfriendly sometimes, and it's very like software kind of driven. And so sometimes I have the feeling that people that are not as interested or less technically driven don't want to get into Jira because they only want some of its functionality. And so having all that extra clutter there makes it complicated. So we use Trello, Jira, and then a lot of Confluence. I think Confluence is a great information radiator as a place where you can just drop information for a project. And then if people need, I have no idea, an artist may ask themselves, what is the safe area to have around the logo of a particular partner? Well, I've put that on Confluence, so they can just go there, research it, and then all the documentation is there. So that would be the main tools that I use. Then obviously a lot of Excel and spreadsheets and stuff like that, PowerPoints when it comes to pitching stuff to partners or reporting on results. And then email, honestly, email. Learn to write good emails.
Yeah.
Just bullet points, straight to the point, whatever works for you. Just be brief, be concise. And that's honestly where I spend most of my time, just writing a lot of emails and being able to take information, process it, and then put it wherever it needs to go. So on Confluence, if it needs to be available for everybody, on an email, if it needs to be proactively communicated to a team, or on a Trello card, if it's something that, is particular to a request that we've made for a particular asset, stuff like that. So my main tools would be, Confluence, Jira, Trello, Excel, which is always, I guess that's pretty standard, PowerPoint, and then email. Just learn to write good emails.
So that's interesting. That makes me smile. So when you talk about being concise in your emails and bullet points and straight to the point, I've heard a myth that that's how you usually talk to programmers. Is that right? They want to know straight to the point what they need to do. And would you say that's the case, or?
I would tend to agree. I think that at least in my experience, again, it's limited, but when it comes to working with artists they'll, because I have a background also in that area, they won't mind me jumping in, and spending 5 minutes on a call with them to discuss the guidelines, the color palettes, the logo placement, what we can do in terms of the assets, what would look cool, ideas for integration, stuff like that they're usually more open. Programmers, I have a feeling that they just like bullet points because they like to be given the information. They like it to be very clear, very concise, and then just let them do their stuff. Also, I feel like because programmers are in such an high demand, at least in my game, I work on Asphalt 9 mostly, but we also have other games in development at the studio in Barcelona. And so we're about to release Disney Speedstorm. And a lot of our programmers are allocated to both games. And so they won't have we're about to release, so it's always a crunch. And so they can't spend 30 minutes or an hour reading through documentation. So if you can be concise and clear in your requirements, it's always good for them, right? And they're generally very appreciative of if you take the time to visualize, what would have been a, 5 lines of paragraph. You take the time to put that and visualize it into, I don't know, a schematic or a few bullet points or a table of some sort. They'll generally be very appreciative of that because that saves them time.
That's interesting. So as you've gone along in your role, you've learned to adapt your communication style to different people then, by the sound of things.
Yeah, I feel that's important, and that's an area that I still have to work on. But tailoring communication is very important because there's sometimes where, if you're talking to maybe somebody that's junior like me, so on my level, somebody that's actually doing the work, you can maybe get into the nitty-gritty of things. You can discuss things in a different manner than you can if it's a manager who, besides your project, has another 30 to take care of, right? So if it's somebody that's actually doing the work, you can go to them. I've always felt like you can go to them with a problem and then work on a solution together, right? So let's say that we need to move a logo because I have no idea, because the save area is not respected, or because there's a line that crosses the background of the logo and for some reason that's not allowed in the brand guidelines or whatever it may be, or there's a bug in a pop-up in the game or whatever it may be. If it's the person actually doing the work, I've always found that it's okay, quote unquote, to go up to them and kind of say, hey, here's the problem. Let's find a solution, you and I together now. Let's brainstorm, or let's put our heads together and come up with a solution. Whereas if it's a manager that has other stuff to do, it's more of like, tell me that there's a problem, but don't just bring me a problem, bring me solutions as well, right? Give me options. And so you do have to tailor not just to the different, let's say, levels of seniority, but also to the teams you're talking to. There's teams that will like more concise communication and teams that would rather jump on a call with you and have you explain and brief them about the project. And there's people that would just rather have an email with like 4 or 5 bullet points and, I'll read it on my own time.
Mm.
And I think that's pretty cool. If people are wanting to learn more about this, I recommend there's a tool called DISC. It's an acronym. I don't remember what it stands for. I know the D starts for dominant. It's basically places people and there's 4 different, let's say, characteristics. Everybody has the 4 of them. Mm-hmm. And then depending on how these characteristics or these personality traits are more present in an individual, you can kind of tailor or ascertain how you should approach them. So for instance, my direct manager, my boss, the other partnerships project manager, I know he's very red. So he likes it to be very clear, very concise. Whereas the 2D lead for our artists, I know, would rather have me jump in a meeting and explain it to them. And he doesn't mind spending 10 minutes with me on a call for me to brief him on a project. Whereas my boss would rather not have a call, just send me a message or an email or whatever in bullet points. And that's how he likes it. So it's just interesting to see how different people like to be approached. And I think that's very important, especially if you're going to be in a position that requires communication skills.
I was just going to say that. So obviously with your role, you're sort of playing that middle person, right, between clients as well as internal teams, whether it's production, development or marketing. So like you say, I guess ultimately the strongest soft skill that you need to have is that communication, I guess.
Oh yeah, I'd say so. I'd say that that's probably my main contribution to the projects I work on, is being sure that the right information gets to the right people at the right time. So I would say communication is probably the most important soft skill. And I would say the same for if you're going to be a producer or whatever it may be, especially if you're going to be in any sort of like middleman kind of role. Tools can be learned. So you can learn Jira. To be honest, I'm a very basic user of Jira, right? I'll report a bug, or I will write a comment, or I'll do whatever, but they're not expecting me to be a Jira administrator. Tools can be learned, but soft skills like communication I find are harder or take longer to develop. So if you want to be in any kind of role that requires soft skills like that, I would say that that should be a big area of focus if you're like looking to get into that area.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. So as you mentioned already, you're currently working on Asphalt 9. Obviously, Asphalt 9, from the way that you've described it and told us so far, it's not a story-driven game. It's a live product that's obviously continuously changing. So what I'd love to know is how would you describe working in a live ops environment, and what's it told you? What's it taught you so far?
So because Asphalt 9 is not really a story-driven game, I mean, we have some story-driven events, but they'll have, we call them drive syndicates, where there's an actual story that's been developing over, I think it's 6 or 7 chapters at this point. But these events we have 2 a year, they're usually short, and they'll feature very few lines of dialogue. And we are looking into exploring that, but right now, as is the game, what we do is we rely on in-game events to engage our players. So they'll usually be based around cars or specific mechanics or objective or new tracks. And the projects I work on would be or would take advantage of these events. And so every 2 months, we release a new update with new cars, and that gives us kind of like a new box of toys to play with. And so it's really fun to see how these events interact with each other, because they'll have different mechanics, they'll appeal to different audiences, and then it's fun to see how these can be optimized to not just make sure that our players have fun, because that's obviously the most important, but also to make money, right? It's a free-to-play game, and so it's interesting to find the right balance between making something that's engaging for the players, but at the same time is profitable and generates revenue for the studio. And our live ops structure can sometimes be a little repetitive. And so that's also one of the things I like about being a partnerships project manager, is that I don't do usually things that fit within our standard template, right? Brands want something custom for them. And so it's nice to be able to break out from what a standard event would be, whether it be what we call a standard, special event, which has its own structure, or a time limited event, and then we have like 17 different types. And it's always nice to be able to, well, I'd like a bit of this type and a bit of this type, and then I'd like to incorporate this mechanic and do this in this way. And then all of a sudden you've concocted a contraption that doesn't really exist, or wouldn't really exist if it weren't for this specific synergy that you have going on with a particular brand or partner or whatever it may be. So I think that's pretty cool. And to be honest, we're working on we're always working on looking at how we can improve or change our live ops structure to make it more engaging for players, and to find ways to with the available tools provide new experiences. So we're always looking to do that, and that's honestly a really fun part of working on a live ops game.
So that's awesome, because that's a very nice segue onto something else I want to ask you. So what I find very interesting, but I know very little about when it comes to like live ops, whether it's on a mobile game or PC, console, those types of games, when we talk about live ops, and I think I've got this right, I may not, so please forgive me, is the telemetry side of things, the behaviors and how players play the game, and the information you can extract from the game to make decisions. Are you involved in any of that sort of side of things, looking at player telemetry and things like that?
Well, we have a team dedicated to that. And I would not say that this is my realm of expertise, but I do touch upon it, because once a partnership is over, we are usually reporting on those results, and we'll analyze internally what went well, what went wrong, and then what can we do to extract learnings and improve so that the next partnership we do is even bigger, right? So I do extract data and try to extract insights from that. And we're always working to track more stuff to make sure that, when does a player start, when do players prefer this mode or this other mode? Will they like this kind of event or this other kind of event? To which kind of players will this kind of event appeal? If we have 2 events that appeal to the same audience, that are, maybe one has one specific type of car and another one has another type of car. Which one will they prefer, or will they not care, or will they play both, or will they just play the the one that's, let's say, most easily accessible on the menu, to avoid scrolling through different events? This is honestly really fun. But I wouldn't say that this is my main area of expertise. I do work with this, but I don't get a chance to extract continuous data continuously as our product managers might. Our product managers have different events every week, and every week they'll have a new opportunity to extract new data and new insights and refine and refine and refine and refine. Because I work with things that are different every time, it's kind of harder for me to extract these insights and compare, like A/B test something. It's not so black or white, because usually from one event to the next, so there will be so many changes that it's sometimes hard to assess where this impact or where this increase in player engagement or participation comes from. But that is also, we do our best, obviously, and that is a really fun part of the job. But no, this is not my area of expertise, but I know we track as much as we can, and we're always looking to track more and extract relevant insights. And that's, again, this ties into being a live ops game. It gives us an opportunity to continuously improve upon what we just did and continuously learn. And so that's always really refreshing.
Yeah, definitely, especially as a player as well. I think if you play a game and it becomes boring and mundane, you're not going to play it. So like you say, in that live ops environment, you can listen to player feedback and you can make changes and make it an enjoyable experience of players. So yeah, that's really cool. So I guess on that then, so again, just to clarify, obviously working on Asphalt 9. So what I'd love to know is, and for anybody that hasn't played it, tell me, what is Asphalt 9 Esports? And then another question on the end of that is, where do you think mobile esports is heading as well?
Wow. So Asphalt 9 Esports will be our events for, let's say, our most engaged players, so that they can show off their skills, right? So we'll have very committed players that spend a lot of time in the game. And so esports will be often their chance to kind of showcase those skills, right? And do so in an environment that kind of feels prestigious and cool, because we'll usually do these esports in association or in partnership with some cool brands. In this case, for instance, we just mentioned Porsche, Bose, and Tag Heuer. So these are cool brands, and so it's always nice for players to be able to show off their skills in an environment that feels like, oh wow, these are big brands that I am playing with or interfacing with in some way. And in terms of mobile esports, honestly, I see this space growing. A lot of people play video games in their mobile devices. I'm still part of the generation that grew playing video games with a controller and a mouse and keyboard. But now my cousin, honestly, he spends more time playing on his phone than he does on his PlayStation. And I think that trend will only continue to grow. And so I see mobile esports growing, at least in terms of player volume. And I'm pretty sure they're also going to grow in terms of popularity. I think that because mobile games are usually short pills of very fast-paced action, they are very, very well, let's say, suited for social media. And so I see, as new generations come up that are maybe more social, that have been just born with social media at the forefront, and with social media as their main platform for consuming content, I think that mobile esports will continue to grow because it's perfectly tailored for that environment, right? Asphalt 9 races are 30 to maybe 2 minutes long at most. And so it's short, it's fast, it's adrenaline filled, because we are an arcade racing game. We're not a simulation game. So our action is crazy. Cars are doing stunts all the time. It's visually very, very stimulating. I think it's great for social media. And I think that as more mobile games continue to develop esports, I think we'll only see a growth in the space.
Awesome. Cool. That's very interesting. Yeah, I must admit, I'm of the same generation with controller and mouse and keyboard, although mouse and keyboard I'm so bad. I'm more of a controller person myself, I must admit. But yeah, no, it's interesting what you said there in terms of fast pace. I think you said 30 seconds to a 2-minute race. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and like for me, I'm addicted to TikTok as well. Like I'm sure many other people are. And obviously the thing that I like about it is how quick it is, the variety. And I imagine obviously that type of format, when you talk about the types of races and things going on in the race and how quick they are, I guess that's sort of catering to that demographic, right? In terms of something fast paced, don't have to put 80 hours into a story driven game. It's something that you can quickly be involved in and then jump out if you want to be as well.
Yeah, I honestly think that for mobile games, this is the kind of like the right size, because 30 seconds is great. It's, you know, you're on the bus, you're waiting on something, you can pick up a game, play a quick race or two, and then drop it once you're done. But at the same time, if you want to put in more hours, like, you know, our most dedicated players will want to do, you can keep racing and racing and racing on the same track with the same car, or change the car so that you can keep perfecting those lines to get those those tenths of a second that will ultimately put you at the top of the leaderboard. So I think that having games that have this sort of like short pills of action, kind of, I don't know, I see them as being more flexible than, let's say, League of Legends or whatever it may be, that you have to put, you know, when you play a League of Legends game, that minimum it's going to be 20 minutes, you know, if you surrender at minute 20, but it's usually a 45-minute commitment, you know, and so it's not, I don't think it's as tailored to social media. You brought up TikTok. Last year, we had a partnership with TikTok where they created a custom page in some regions for Asphalt 9. And so players coming from TikTok could enter Asphalt 9 and then unlock a livery, a TikTok branded livery in the game, as well as some currency and a card. So, you know, it's, and now we have a bit of a TikTok community, right? So it's great because it was a way for us to, number one, enter the TikTok space, because before that partnership took place, we were not on TikTok. It was a way for us to enter the space and to kind of present the game as, look, here's a fast-paced game that will give you like fast, cool, you know, eye-catching action that's, you know, free to play and accessible. And, you know, if you enter now, you'll get some cool bonuses.
Awesome.
I know that was a cool partnership we did last year, but honestly, yes, social media, sorry to cut you off, social media and short pills of action. Short pills of action are great for social media. And if players want to be more committed, it gives you the flexibility to do that more, which you might not be able to do with, again, a League of Legends or another kind of sit down and play game where you know it's a big time commitment.
Awesome. And I guess obviously the types of partnerships you've mentioned there, especially with TikTok, I can only imagine that brought a wealth of like user generated content as well from playing your game, I imagine.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. I mean, if you go on TikTok or on social media, you'll find a lot of meme content or content that will make either most of our content will either be like crazy cool stunts, like those perfect laps from our pro players, or will be like fun pirouettes or crazy acrobatics, or you know, people crashing into stuff for no apparent reason. There is a lot of user generated content, and of course, being on TikTok has provided our audience with a space that's also now validated, because we are there also officially, has provided them with a space to kind of post this fast paced content that obviously before we didn't have. And so, yeah, TikTok is honestly a great place for user generated content. If you go on there, you'll find a bunch of videos for Asphalt 9. I feel like it's maybe more conducive than even YouTube, which is where most of our audience was before, right? We have content creators, and most of them are YouTube based, so they'll create videos on YouTube. But TikTok is a place where you'll also find a lot of user-generated content because it's just fast-paced, it's 30 seconds, and it's very, very tailored to Asphalt 9. You know, a 30-second video on TikTok will work a lot better than a 30-second video on YouTube, I feel. Because if I see a 30-second video on YouTube, I'm like, oh, I'm not sure if it's the investment of, you know, tapping on it because it's just 30 seconds. But if I can just swipe and get a new video on TikTok, all of a sudden that same 30-second video is viewed in a very different light.
That's cool. I feel like you need to reach out to Lotus, because I don't know whether you've seen their TikTok account, but some of the comments and some of the posts that they make, they're so funny. Like, you wouldn't think it's a car company in terms of how they run their TikTok. I imagine that would be a great partner to have a partnership with.
Correct. We worked with them last year. We did not touch on their TikTok, so that's probably a new lever to work with this year, another layer that we can add to a partnership with them. They're also turning 75 this year, I believe, if I'm not wrong. So there's another opportunity here for a partnership with them. But Lotus, we partnered with them on ESL Snapdragon Pro Series esports competition. They were our official car licensor for the competition. So the whole competition had 4 different stages that used 4 different Lotus cars that we have in the game. And they also send some cool goodies for our players so that they could, you know, basically by participating, our players got a chance to win some Lotus goodies, and that's always cool. And now that you mention it, I'm gonna quickly take a look, because knowing that they are turning 75 this year, so there's an opportunity to do something cool with them again. If they have a cool cool TikTok account and they're just, you know, funny and witty, I'm sure that, you know, it's just another layer to add, and I think it's gonna be pretty cool. Thanks for bringing that up.
No, that's okay. Whoever runs the Lotus account on TikTok deserves a raise, in my opinion. Honestly, some of the things they do, I don't know whether it's one person or a team. I sort of think it might be one person, because the language that's used and the way that they comment on things and posts, it's consistent. But anyway, yeah, 100% reach out after this. I'd have a look at their content. It's really, really funny. Cool. Okay, so we spoke a little bit there about mobile esports. So I'd love to pick your brains around esports as a whole. Like, where do you see esports going as a whole?
So let's see. Esports in general are huge already, and I can only imagine them growing again. I would say that video games are probably more accessible sometimes that some traditional sports, because it's just, you need a mobile device, which pretty much everybody has, and you can already take part in an esports competition, or you don't need a crazy powerful computer to run, you know, certain esports titles like League of Legends or CSGO or whatever it may be. Oh, sorry, I have a tiny visitor. Hi, Maggie. Say hi.
Oh.
Force the door open somehow. So esports are already huge, and I can only see them growing. They give players of all ages, backgrounds, whatever it may be, a chance at being at the spotlight, you know, a chance of, like, all of a sudden achieving greatness and feeling like, you know, being at the top. And they're incredibly accessible. I argue that they're maybe more accessible than some traditional sports, because all you need is like a mobile device, or you don't even need a powerful computer, and you can already take part in an esports competition. And, you know, with some traditional sports where the rules are static, right? So the rules of soccer are fixed, or the rules of tennis are fixed. The rules of esports are changing. Games adapt, and new patches will come in, or new updates will drop. And all of a sudden, a character or a car or an item or whatever it may be that was outside of the metagame a couple of updates ago is now relevant. And so that will not only keep it fresh, but it will also keep it very exciting, because a team that was all at the bottom, because they're able to exploit this new update better than one of the top teams, all of a sudden can find themselves being at the top or being competitive again. just because they're able to exploit that loophole or that item or that buff, or they're able to play with these new rules better than other teams. And so I feel like this keeps esports fresh, and therefore they're always exciting to watch. And so I think that the space will only grow. Something that, if you compare this, for instance, to, let's say, I don't know, Formula One, for instance, right? Formula One has a static set of rules every year. And, halfway through the season, maybe, if, I don't know, maybe Red Bull has a terribly dominant car, and all of a sudden the interest is not on who will be first or second, but, who'll be fifth or sixth, right? Because that's where the real fight, where there's real close fighting and constant overtaking. With esports, I feel that because the rules are not static, you don't have to resort to, who will win the race is not really interesting. I'm more interested in seeing who, the fight in the middle of the pack. Because the rules are constantly changing, a team that wasn't competitive last week can be all of a sudden very competitive this week because they're able to exploit a gap in the system or a specific buff or nerf in a character or an item a lot better than the rest. And there's another thing here. We still broadcast esports following a very traditional template, that comes from traditional sports, right? From soccer, basketball, tennis, whatever it may be. And at some point, I also see this changing. And when this happens, I can't imagine how this would change. But as esports kind of develops its own language, also from a media standpoint, so which are the camera angles? How is it broadcasted? How are the breaks for ads broken into into the stream? How are brands integrated into a broadcast? How are players interviewed? When are they interviewed? And stuff like that. I think that we'll see a real revolution. And I think that once we develop our own language, this space will grow even further than what it already is now.
Well, yeah, awesome. So what I find really interesting about esports and fascinating is, there's so many different things, but things that catch my eye is obviously the amount of prize money that's involved with some of these competitions. I know I'm trying to think now. There was a record prize in Vancouver. I don't know if it was last year or the year before, and I'm sure it was $1 million. And I can't remember if it was Dota or what game it was. I'm not sure whether you know, but just the amount of money from a prize perspective that's involved, it's crazy.
I mean, these esports competitions, especially if they're, when you're just mentioning games like Dota or League of Legends or stuff like that, they are so big. These games or these esports competition, they don't just have their esports players that compete. They also have an audience that doesn't necessarily play video games at that, the game at that level, but that enjoys watching people perform at that high level. And you will even find yourself with people that follow the esports broadcasts, but that don't even play the game. They just enjoy the drama and the storytelling that comes from a good esports competition. And so when you have an audience that's so big, brands, I feel, are willing to put in resources to be at the forefront. So in the case of, what is it? DreamHack, I think Intel Extreme Masters or something like that. Now I'm embarrassing myself. I can't remember the name of the competition. Or I don't know, ESL with Snapdragon, with Qualcomm. There's a lot of money behind that. I'm sure. I don't have the exact figures, but I'm sure it's not a cheap contract, because all of a sudden Snapdragon is everywhere in these broadcasts. It's in the titles, it's in everybody's minds if you follow the competitions. And so it might not necessarily translate into immediate sales, which I'm sure it does, but it might not translate it into immediate sales necessarily, because a lot of the audience you'll be reaching might be people that don't have, children or kids or young adults that don't have that huge purchasing power to maybe purchase, in our case, a Lamborghini car or a Tag Heuer watch or a Bose pair of speakers. But in terms of awareness and of positioning yourself against the competition, that has huge power. And so I think it makes sense that brands are willing to put these huge prize monies, the companies will put these, or that brands are willing to put in the investment in order to have these big prize pools. Because then all of a sudden, it not only boosts the competition and the drama, but it makes sure that, wow, this is a big brand. They have named the competition. Look at this prize pool. It's huge. It has all my favorite players. And just look at the broadcast. It looks like a TV show. And I feel that it just makes sense for brands to pump money into this space. And I think that they're only going to continue to pump in more money because, again, my cousin, who's like, what, 12 now, he doesn't watch TV. He watches Twitch and YouTube. That's how he consumes content. And, you'll get lucky if you catch him watching Netflix one day. And the kind of content you'll find on Twitch is esports, it's live streaming, it's that kind of thing. And so I only see brands pumping more and more money as this generation continues to grow.
Yeah. So you say it was your cousin who's 12, right?
Correct.
Yeah. I'm 32 and I watch an excessive amount of YouTube and Twitch. Too much, to be honest. My partner does tell me off, but I'm the same, to be honest. I love games, so I'll be watching certain content creators live streaming on Twitch, and then when I'm done there, I'll go to YouTube and I'll watch all sorts on there as well. So I definitely get the appeal. I love it personally as well. So I definitely see the appeal. Now, just one thing that I found interesting that you mentioned there, and I'm going to try and find the name of the company or the studio that are doing it. I'm not sure whether you're aware, but when we talk about esports, there is a company that is building or has built a stadium, a virtual stadium for people to watch of esports events in. I'm not sure whether it's VR powered. Are you aware of that?
I've read about it, but I couldn't tell you which company it is. But I think this is super, super powerful. When I read it, I remember thinking, what a cool way to make the experience of watching a video game esports tournament more native, feel more like it's made for video games, by video game developers for video game fans, or, because as I said, traditional broadcasts are for traditional sports, right? And so at some point there needs to be, or there will be a revolution here that will change the way we do things. And this might be, for instance, this might be one of the ways we do, right? That's incredibly powerful. I'm going to actually look at it too.
I think it's Vertex. I'm sure there's other people out there doing it, but I believe it is Vertex, which is VIRTEX. So Vertex Stadium. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, when it comes to like esports and things like that, I'm very uneducated. So I could be wrong, but they caught my eye a couple of years ago in terms of what they were trying to do. I'm not sure whether they have anything live at the moment. I see a lot of coming soon and in 2023, actually. So yeah, I'm going to be so curious to see what that looks like, because I think what you said there as well is when you watch an esports event, it's very much the same, right? And it seems to copy like a sport, the way that live sports showcase a game in terms of like having commentators in a booth and things like that. I think what's really cool, like PUBG, for example, I've seen that you can zoom right into competitors and look at the environment, but that's controlled by a broadcaster rather than you as a spectator. So I'm curious to see if this will change it and how more interactive watching esports might be.
I think it'll be crazy. I mean, if this catches on and this is accessible and works well, this can be a revolution in terms of how esports are viewed, because all of a sudden it won't feel like we're using, let's say, quote unquote, and this is bad, but yesterday's mediums for something that's of today. We're going to use something, that's forward looking, that's new, and that will be made specifically for esports and for video games instead of something that we're borrowing from traditional sports. And I think that's going to be great if this works and actually catches on. I mean, now I'm gonna definitely look into this because it looks. I mean, I'm on their website now, and it looks amazing. Like it looks like a really, really cool way to experience esports.
100%.
So that's incredible, super exciting.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see with that if it's one of those where you have to like purchase an Oculus or some form of like VR headset to actually make use of it, or maybe they've come up with their own technology to facilitate. But yeah, no, I'm gonna be curious to see what that looks like and how they do it.
Yeah, I hope that ideally I would wish for the barrier to entry to be really, really low, to allow a lot of people to have access to the experience, because that's the main way I see this working, or the only way I see this working, is that what I wouldn't wish is for this new medium to broadcast esports, for it to become a barrier to entry, or for it to have a barrier to entry that's higher than what we currently have. Because then it's going to create a divide where some people might not be able to enjoy or have the best experience for esports because they don't have the means or the access to a specific technology. So hopefully, the barrier to entry with this new technology is going to be still very low, so that we can carry all of our audience, or most of it, from traditional esports broadcasts that we have now to this new medium.
Definitely. Okay. I feel like my next question might need to be fact checked a little bit, but there you go. And somebody else can do that. But obviously video games, and this is where it needs to be fact checked. Video games have been around since the 70s. And I feel more recently, and by saying recently, let's say within the last sort of 10-ish years, it's become this multi-billion-dollar industry, so popular, and everybody seems to want to play games, and it seems to be one of the most popular medias out there at the moment, and has been for some time. So with this in mind, and talking about partnerships and working with brands, etc., tell me about how brands integrate themselves into video games, and what does the future of this look like, in your opinion?
Well, gaming is super powerful because, unlike traditional advertising, when you are playing a video game and you have a, let's say, proper video game integration with a brand, the content or the brand is not pushed to you actively, like you are forced to watch an ad on a broadcast, or you walk by a billboard and it's just there. All of a sudden, a brand, if it's integrated correctly, can be part of your playing experience. And all of a sudden, you're not just passively participating in this brand's storytelling, or you're not passively, let's say, consuming this content, but you can be an active participant. There's a feeling of agency when you play video games, because the choice to do something, to go turn left or turn right, or go through this door, this other door, or choose a different dialogue option, that choice is yours. It's not made by a character in a movie. It's not empathy we're experiencing when we play video games. I feel it's more agency. And so if you're able to integrate a brand within a video game in a way that takes advantage of that agency, I feel that you're not, it's just much more powerful. Like, for instance, let's say you are, Coca-Cola, right? And we know Call of Duty, there are zombies, right? Modes, you'll have sometimes these drinks that will provide you specific abilities, right? So why cannot the Coca-Cola be the bottle that you drink your specific power-up from be branded, right? And now you have all of a sudden somebody that's consuming your product while playing, right? And it doesn't feel like, your branding can be there as big as you want in the vending machine where you purchase the drink from. It can be as big as you want, but it doesn't feel invasive. It doesn't feel intrusive. right? And then when you have people discussing the game, you'll have people saying, oh, let's go to the Coca-Cola machine, right? Or let's just say that you have a big billboard or a big ad or whatever, something eye-catching, and a key place in a map in, I don't know, a Warzone or a any other kind of game, you know, where you have a specific map that you play on. If that's item, whatever it may be, is a key part of the map, is a you know, a point that's contended, all of a sudden you'll have people saying, using shorthand, and they might use your brand as shorthand. Hey, let's meet at Coca-Cola, because everybody knows that there's a big billboard with Coca-Cola plastered on it, and everybody knows what that is, and that is people speaking about your brand, talking about your brand in a way that doesn't feel like you've been pushed to all of a sudden watch and consume this brand, but in a way that feels more, let's say, more natural, and that it's more subconscious. It's not invasive. Like, I'm aware of watching an ad when I'm watching one in a broadcast. But I remember, one of the old Call of Duty saying, let's meet by, and then there was this fake brand, right? I think it was in Arcaden, I believe, in Modern Warfare 3. And it was a very specific ad, and they would say, let's meet here. And that was a call out for us, right? We would know where to meet, or there's an enemy player here. If that, instead of saying being a random brand, was my brand, that gives me a tremendous amount of exposure. And all of a sudden I'm in the vocabulary of this community of people. And that is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you say that, especially that little piece there where it's like, obviously Warzone being a battle royale game, it's obviously if you drop it in different areas or something happens, obviously you need to regroup because you're stronger in numbers. So when you talk about let's meet at the Coca-Cola billboard, that's really interesting that you say it like that, because I feel like more realistic games, so like for example FIFA or golf games or UFC and things like that, those games, even in real life, and are not driven by brand, but there's a big brand connect there. So for example, if you're playing a game of FIFA, all the billboards around the actual pitch, they're constantly churning out different brands. And it's not just, obviously, the way that I see it, it's not just a way of FIFA to ram a brand down your throat whilst you're playing a game. That's obviously, they want you to see them, but you're more focused on the game that you're playing. Whereas that actually mirrors real life in terms of the brands are visible even in a real game. So what do you think the challenges, maybe that's not the right word, but in terms of putting these types of brands into maybe a game that's not based on real world? So I mean, Call of Duty could be that, or there could be maybe like an open world type game as well. Like what do you think the issues might be with brands getting involved with games like that?
Well, I feel like when you're working with a context that's not necessarily based in the real world or in the present now, it can also give brands a chance to show their vision. So I see real opportunities there, not for maybe actions for current products, as a way to like, hey, drink Coca-Cola because, you're drinking Coca-Cola in the Call of Duty game. But I see it more as a way of like, here's how I, as Apple or as whatever, and I'm saying Apple because they have a very clear branding and vision, in their product lines, in their ads, you can see the kind of future they envision. And so I see games that are not based in the real world as a great opportunity for brands to showcase their vision for the future. And so, in the future, Coca-Cola will be this, or in the future, an Apple computer will look like that, right? And this can be the same thing for, cars and, in our case, right? We have concept cars in the game, but let's say that Asphalt, instead of being based in real life, right, and, featuring real locations, was based in I don't know, futuristic tracks or whatever it may be, that all of a sudden would give us, or would give brands a chance to explore what their vision for the future is and communicate that to audiences and be like, look, if you support me and you work with me, or you consume my product, or you are part of our fan base or our community, this is what you'll be contributing towards. If you give me your trust as a brand, or if you support me, this is where I will like to take things. And I see that as a huge opportunity to showcase brand vision and mission and values, probably more so than in a realistic scenario where you may be more constrained because you can't dream as big because you're constrained by reality.
Cool. So I'm going to hit you with one more question based around this, because I find it really interesting. So talking about brands again, but outside of games. And what I mean by that is not product placement in a game, but outside. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by this. So a brand that I find fascinating how big it's got is G Fuel. And obviously I'm not sure how much you know about G Fuel and what it is, but obviously they have they're engaging so many different content creators, and the brand G Fuel, especially when it comes to streams now, it just seems to be every streamer drinks G Fuel. So same question again, kind of, but also based on outside of games and branding. What do you think the future looks like for that, and what's your opinion on sort of working with brands outside of the actual game itself, if that makes sense?
Well, I feel like there are brands that are catered specifically to gamers. I feel G Fuel might be one of them, where they are very much are catering to a gaming audience. And so I feel like whereas the product placement, when you're bringing Coca-Cola into the game, is you're bringing a brand that exists outside of gaming and you're bringing it into gaming. I feel like with G Fuel and such, you might be doing maybe the opposite process. And I haven't really given this too much thought, but I feel like you might be taking a brand from the context of gaming to outside of that context, right? And you're bringing it into a new space. And so I think that's very interesting. Now, I don't really have a vision at this point for how this will develop, but I think it's really interesting, and it will be very interesting to see how it grows, and to see brands come or that have developed in a gaming space, how they can grow outside of that and reach a wider audience. And because I wouldn't want, obviously, a brand that's been or that has created its image or curated an image that's very gaming focused to not be able to break outside of that. Obviously, you would want these brands to grow and reach as many people as you can, because by doing that, at the same time, you're also bringing games to people in an indirect way, right? If it's a gaming, in a way, it's a brand that has a very strong presence in gaming. Somebody that might not be into gaming, by consuming that product or by learning about it, might all of a sudden be exposed to video games, and that can be an into playing whatever the game may be, or into the industry, or into esports, or whatever it may be. So I think this is honestly pretty cool, but I'm afraid to say that I haven't really given this too much thought.
It's funny you say that, but you've also made me think about something as well from the way you answered that question then, because to me, G Fuel is an energy drink, and that's what it is. It's an energy drink. There's so many other different types of energy drinks out there. But when I talk about G Fuel, the first thing I think of is games, even before the actual drink itself, because I've seen it that many times on a stream or on a video that's related to games that it's just in the back of my mind now. So yes, it's an energy drink first, but then it just makes me think of games. So like you just said there, it really got me thinking about that. And I think you're right. Interesting.
I think it's going to be really cool to see how these brands evolve, from how they grow from outside, let's say, the gaming niche, and they start approaching other niches, and what effect that has with the wider gaming community. If it will bring more people in, how will these people that are coming in to the gaming space, not from games themselves, but from brands and their association to gaming, what effect will this have on the space, and how will they find, or how will the experience of video games be? Will it be different than somebody who has entered video games from a perspective of I want to be entertained and be, be part of a story or a narrative, or, experience this amazing visuals or great artistry that's sometimes involved in video games. Or I just don't know how to say this. I think it's gonna be really cool to see how this changes. And it is obviously a great differentiator for brands. Red Bull is the crazy stunned, energy brand. Monster might be the edgy rebel one. Whereas, and G Fuel might be, maybe it's just the gaming energy drink, right? And so it's also a way for this brand, for G Fuel, to be different from the competition.
Yeah, I agree. Excellent. Okay, last question for you. So I'm curious to know, what is next for you in your professional development, and in terms of your career, what does that look like?
Well, as I have developed in my current role, I have come to realize that my favorite part of my role is the technical problem solving, right? So how can I, let's say with the Tag Heuer watch, right? There had to be new code development, the UI had to be changed, but again, a new, let's say, 2D asset had to be created and integrated into the game and tested. And I found myself enjoying the technical problem solving a lot. So I'd like to transition to a production role, probably. It is a tough department to break into, though, because especially if, like me, you don't have a technical background or come from QA, I feel that a colleague of mine told me back when I was asking, reaching out on LinkedIn, how did you become to be a producer? Because I told him, like, you're an architect, it has nothing to do with video games. How are you a producer, right? How do you interface with programmers or engineers or 3D modelers or people that have a very specific set of very highly technical expertise? How do you speak their language? How do you communicate with these people? And he told me, you don't really start as a producer. You kind of start doing something else and then find yourself becoming a producer. And because you've started working in something else, you will naturally develop the skills to talk with these other departments and interface with them. And you don't need to know everything. You just need to be able to speak their language in broad terms, and then trust that these people, because they're the experts, will deliver on the promise, right? And if there's a problem, and this is why it's also important for, people that are not necessarily the middleman, but the technical people themselves, to have good communication skills, to be able to take a problem that's highly technical and be able to break it down for a producer to understand, so that the producer or myself or whoever it is can take action. Oh, there is a bug in this specific tool, but this specific tool interfaces with this other tool. So this bug that's on this tool is not really the responsibility of the team that's working on this tool, but the responsibility of this other team. And then if you're able to break it down correctly, not only am I able to communicate it properly to the team that actually was going to have to go in and fix the bug, but I'm able to find the right person more easily. And for the next time we see something like that happen, I will have that knowledge in me, right? And I just feel that, again, you don't really begin as a producer. You kind of work your way or find yourself becoming one. And I think that that's what's going to be next for me. Hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll be finding myself going more towards that area of game development.
Okay. And in terms of, obviously, aside from gaining on-job experience as a producer, is there anything that you're doing maybe in your spare time or in your current role to help get you to that point? Is there anything you're reading or anything that you're doing outside of work to try and get you there?
Yes. And there's always something that I think is very important, especially for people that are, like me, new to the industry. I have barely a year of experience, a year and 4 months, 5 months. I consider myself a new player in the industry. And so I find that people that want to break in or that are relatively new, and especially if you want to transition to a different role, or you want to move or learn about another area, it's very important to keep yourself up to date. And so I consider project management my main vertical. I can talk project management all day long, but I might not be able to talk code all day long because I barely know, I know the basics only. So what I'll do is, all right, I see that our teams could be more agile. So, okay, so I'm going to learn about Scrum because I see that being really important in how, software development teams work and organize themselves and how they're able to deliver value to the company and to the video game itself quicker. Okay, so let me learn about that, and grow in that area. But also at the same time, let me go on my spare time and learn about coding. So for instance, I took a small Python course, right? And now I know my way around Python more or less. And now I can see some of the errors logs or some of the code in the game, and some of the tools that I touch or that I mess with. And all of a sudden I can recognize some of the patterns. I'm like, okay, it's not Python, but I know that this is this kind of thing, and therefore it's organized in this. And so from this, I can kind of create a mental map of how I believe this is organized. And I think that dedicating time to growing as a professional, and myself, if I want to go into the more technical things, not only do I need to know how do these teams organize themselves, so agile project management and software development practices and stuff like that, but also I want to be able to understand what they do. So if they are mentioning, refactoring or, I don't know, complexity, or they're going to be mentioning whatever it may be, terminology, lingo that's specific to them, or they're going to be mentioning, oh, I have a problem with this function, or I cannot do this because the class is defined in this particular manner. I don't need to be able to necessarily write code myself, but I'd like to be able to understand what they mean. Okay, what's a class? And what's a function? And what's a call? And why is it broken? And what's an API? How do these two tools talk to each other? And how is the back end of our game organized? And why is it managed by different teams? So I feel that if you want to keep growing, it's important to use some of your spare time to develop in that area, especially if you have a genuine interest. I like to learn a little about a lot, or to know a little about a lot. I have a lot of interests. And so I find myself being very entertained by learning code, or Jira or agile software development, because it gives you a new perspective on things. And if you want to grow in the industry, I feel it's really important to keep growing your, let's say, toolbox, because you never know when it's going to come into play.
Awesome. That's good to hear. Albert, I want to thank you for your time today. I've really enjoyed speaking with you. Thank you for the time that you've given us. And I'm hoping that people watching this video will find it really insightful as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.